Jack Reynolds didn't knock. He kicked the door open with his boot, walked straight to his brother's chest, grabbed him by the collar, and said 4 words through his teeth, "My parents." Ryan's face went white, not from the grip, not from the 40 bikers standing in the driveway, from the fact that his brother, the man he'd been lying to for 15 years, had finally come home. And he already knew the answer. If this story hits you, subscribe to the channel and follow along until the very end. But comment, tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The call came at 11:47 at night. Jack Reynolds was sitting at the head of a long conference table in Denver, reviewing a contract worth $4 million. His company, Black Ridge Motorcycles, had just landed a regional distribution deal that would push their production capacity to levels he hadn't even dreamed about when he was 19 years old and broke, and riding out of Montana on a motorcycle he'd repaired himself 3 times over. Phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number, Montana area code. He almost didn't answer. He had 17 missed calls from business contacts already. His attorney had been trying to reach him since morning. The expansion deal required signatures by midnight. Something made him pick it up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was a woman, shaking. "Jack Reynolds?" He didn't recognize it at first. "Speaking. Who is this?" "This is Eleanor Marsh. I live next door to your parents' place. I've lived there going on 32 years. He sat up straighter. "Yes, ma'am." "Is everything all right?" There was a pause. Not a short one. The kind of pause that tells you everything before a single word is spoken. "Jack, honey, I don't know who else to call. I don't even know if I should be calling you. Your brother told me not to get involved." Jack felt the first cold thread run down the back of his neck. "Tell me what's happening." Another pause. Then she said it. "Your parents aren't living in their house anymore." The room went very quiet. The attorneys on the other side of the table were still talking. Papers were still shuffling. Someone was refilling their coffee, but Jack heard none of it. "What do you mean they aren't in the house?" "I mean, they're not there, Jack. I've been watching that property for 20 years. I know when something isn't right. I tried to look through the windows last week because I hadn't seen your mother in the garden for over a month. Curtains were gone. The furniture was gone." Her voice cracked. "I found them out behind the old barn, on the back of the property. There's an old structure back there. They're living in it. Trying to." Jack stood up from the table. His chair rolled back and hit the wall. Every person in that conference room stopped talking. Jack's voice was barely a sound. "How long have they been out there?" "I don't know exactly. A few months at least, maybe longer. I brought them food twice this week. Your mother, Jack, she's not well. Your father can barely walk. I didn't know what to do. Ryan told me last time I saw him that everything was fine, and I should stay out of family business." Jack was already moving. "Mrs. Marsh, you did the right thing. Thank you." He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "Leave them alone. I'm coming." He ended the call. His lead attorney, David Holt, was already on his feet. The contract signed. "Whatever needs signing." Jack didn't look back. "That's what I pay you for." He rode through the night. No escort, no security. Just Jack Reynolds on his black iron, 883, pushing it harder than he should have, on a mountain highway at midnight. The cold air cutting through his jacket like a knife. The white line of the road disappearing under his wheels at 80 miles an hour. He had made this same ride in reverse 15 years ago. He remembered every mile of it. He had been 23 years old, broke and humiliated. A town that never believed in him. A father who loved him but didn't know how to say it. A mother who cried the morning he left and tried to hide it from him because she didn't want him to feel guilty. His younger brother, 19 at the time, standing in the yard watching Jack load the last bag onto the motorcycle. "You'll be back," Ryan had said, not like a question, like something else, like a warning, or maybe Jack thought now like a plan. Jack had told him, "I'll be back. And when I come back, things are going to be different." He had kept that promise, just not in the way he imagined. In Harlow Creek, Montana, at 4:30 in the morning, was exactly the same. Same diner on the corner. Same hardware store with the faded sign. Same water tower with the high school year painted on it from 2001. Jack knew every road by memory. He turned off the main highway onto the old county road and followed it past 3 farms until the mailbox with the dented R appeared on his left. He pulled to the side. He sat on the motorcycle for a moment. He could see the house from the road, or what was left of the house. The lights were off, the windows were dark, the driveway was empty, and it didn't look right. A house where people live looks a certain way, even in the dark. Something alive about it. Something that tells you a person woke up that morning inside those walls and will again tomorrow. This house didn't have that. It looked emptied out. Jack got off the motorcycle and walked the property. The front door locked. He went around the side. The yard was overgrown. The old garden, the one his mother tended every spring and summer for as long as he could remember, was gone to weeds. He kept walking, past the old oak tree he used to climb as a boy, the rusted fence post he and Ryan had bent wrestling one summer, past the chicken coop that had been empty for 20 years. He came around the back, and he stopped. Structure behind the barn, old, built from wood that had been weathered gray. The original homestead, from before his grandfather's time, Jack had always assumed. A storage building, maybe at one point a second shelter. He had never paid much attention to it growing up. The light inside, a small one, a candle or a battery lamp. Jack walked toward it. He opened the door. The smell hit him first. Wood, old blankets, medication, closed air that had not been properly circulated in a long time. Then he saw them. His father, Robert Reynolds, a man who had once lifted a 4-cylinder engine block off a truck bed without a hoist and set it down soft as a sleeping child, was lying on a narrow mattress on the floor. He was smaller than Jack remembered. His face was pale, was audible from across the room. A ragged, labored sound that no 72-year-old man should be making without a doctor nearby. His mother, Linda, was sitting beside him in an old folding chair, awake. She had a blanket across her shoulders and a paperback Bible in her lap, her finger holding a page she had probably read a dozen times already because there was nothing else to do out here. She looked up when the door opened, and when she saw her son's face, her whole body seemed to exhale like she had been holding one long breath for months without knowing it. "Mac," she whispered. He crossed the room in 4 steps and knelt down in front of her, her hands in his. They were cold. Even in August, they were cold. His voice broke. He didn't try to hold it together. "Happen. What is this? Why are you out here?" Linda looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She was past the stage of crying. That was the worst part. "Your brother said you were having problems with the business," she said softly. "He said you couldn't afford to help right now. He said not to bother you." Stared at her. "He said what?" "He said not to bother you, that you were struggling." Her chin trembled slightly, but her voice stayed even. "We didn't want to be a burden to you." Jack stood up slowly. He turned away from her, so she wouldn't see his face in that moment, because what was on his face was not something a mother should ever see on her son. He called 911. Within 20 minutes, paramedics were there, then an ambulance, then 2 sheriff's deputies who recognized the property from county records. Jack followed the ambulance to Harlow Creek General. In his truck, he'd borrowed Mrs.'s pickup because the motorcycle was no way to follow an ambulance. And he sat in the waiting area for 2.5 hours while doctors assessed his parents. The attending physician, a woman in her 40s named Dr. Carol Henley, found him in the waiting room just before 7 in the morning. She sat across from him. She folded her hands, and Jack knew before she opened her mouth that he wasn't going to like what she said. "Your father has a respiratory infection that's been untreated for at minimum 6 to 8 weeks, she said. "He also has a fluid buildup around the left lung that's going to require drainage. Also looking at a possible cardiac issue that we need to investigate further. He should have been seen months ago." Said nothing. "Your mother," she continued, "is severely dehydrated. She's also been without one of her essential medications. She has a thyroid condition for what looks like at least 3 months. That explains the fatigue, the confusion, the cold sensitivity. Small things, Mr. Reynolds. Will they be all right?" Dr. Henley paused, the professional kind of pause that doctors use when they're choosing between honesty and comfort. "We got him here in time," she said. "They'll need care in time." "Yes, they should recover." Jack nodded once. "Thank you, doctor." She stood to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to ask you something, and I hope you understand it's not an accusation. It's just something I need to understand from a medical standpoint." He looked at her. "Were you aware of the situation they were living in?" The question hit him somewhere behind the sternum. He felt it land. "No," he said quietly, "I was not." Dr. Henley nodded slowly. She didn't push further. But the question stayed in the room long after she left. Jack sat with his parents for most of the morning. His father drifted in and out. When he was awake, he didn't say much. That had always been Robert's way. He was a man of tools and work and silence, and his silence now was no different than it had ever been, except that it was thinner, like the man himself. At one point, Robert opened his eyes and looked directly at Jack. "You came," he said. "Yeah, Pop, I came." Robert closed his eyes again. That was all. But it was enough to undo something in Jack's chest that had been locked up for 15 years. His mother was more alert. By mid-morning, she was sitting up, drinking from a cup of broth a nurse had brought, and watching her son the way she had always watched him, with that careful, measuring love that mothers have. The kind that sees everything but doesn't always say what it sees. "Tell me what happened," Jack said. Linda wrapped both hands around her cup. "It started about 2.5 years ago," she said. "Ryan came to us. He said there were some problems with the house, structural things. He said it needed work before winter and it was going to cost money." She looked down. "We trusted him. He handled everything for us. You know how your father is. He can fix a carburetor blindfolded, but the moment someone shows him a legal document, he shuts down. Was always the one who managed the paperwork." "What kind of paperwork, Mom?" "I don't know exactly. Things for your father to sign. Said it was maintenance approvals, permits, that kind of thing." She paused. "He signed them." Jack kept his voice very even. "And then what?" "Then the house started having problems. The furnace went out last fall. Had a bad leak. Ryan said the repairs were too expensive and that we should stay in the storage building for a while, just until the work was done. He said it would only be a few weeks." "A few weeks?" Jack stared at the floor tiles. A few weeks had become months. "Did you call him when the weeks passed?" "Yes." Her voice didn't change, but something in her eyes did. "He said to be patient. He said the contractors were slow. He said you were going through a difficult time with the business, and we shouldn't put more pressure on you." "He said I was going through a difficult time," Jack repeated. "He said your company was having cash flow problems. He showed us he had printed out something from the internet. He said was about your company." Her eyes came up to meet his. "True, Jack? Were you struggling?" Jack looked at his mother for a long moment. "No, Mom," he said. "Black Ridge had its best year in history last year." The silence between them was very heavy. Linda set her cup down on the tray. Carefully, very slowly. "He lied to us," she said. "Like a question." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once. Just once. Then she looked out the window at the pale Montana morning. "I thought something wasn't right," she said quietly. "My son, both of you are my sons." Jack stepped outside the hospital at noon. He stood in the parking area and called Ryan 4 times. "Hey man, what's up?" Jack stood very still. He recognized the voice. He recognized the easy, casual tone. The tone of a man who hadn't been caught yet. "Hey Ryan, what's going on? You in town?" "I'm at Harlow Creek General." Pause. "The hospital? Why? Is everything—" "Mom and Dad are here." Silence. "I picked them up this morning," Jack continued. "I'm behind the barn. From the storage shed where they've been living for what sounds like at least 3 to 4 months." The silence stretched longer. "Jack, listen. I'm listening. It's complicated. The house needed serious work and Jack's voice dropped to a register his crew would have recognized immediately. The voice he used right before. Something stopped being a conversation. "I'm going to ask you one question. I need you to think very carefully about your answer. Where is the money?" Another silence. This one was different from the first. "Money." Jack closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. "The money I've been sending home every single month for 10 years. I've been sending $3,000 to $5,000 a month to an account you set up. Mom and Dad, for medical bills, for repairs, for property taxes." He opened his eyes. "I went through my bank records this morning while I was sitting in that waiting room. 10 years. Somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. All of it transferred to that account. All of it with your name on the authorization." His voice stayed completely flat. "Is it?" The silence on the other end of the line went on for so long that Jack pulled the phone away from his ear to check if the call had dropped. It hadn't. Finally, Ryan spoke. "I need to explain some things to you." "You do," Jack agreed, "and you're going to. But right now, I need you to answer one question. Yes or no. Did Mom and Dad ever receive that money?" "Some of it." Jack said nothing. "Some of it went to them in the beginning. There were real repairs and medical things. But then I went through some things, Jack. Financial things. And come to the hospital, Jack said. Just listen. Come to the hospital. Today, I'll be here. He paused. If you don't come, I'll come find you. You know me well enough to know that's not something you want. He ended the call. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood there for another minute. Then he went back inside because his parents were in there. And that was where he needed to be. Arrived at 3 in the afternoon. Jack saw him before Ryan saw him. He was crossing the lobby, hands in his jacket pockets, head slightly down the walk of a man who was working out what to say as he moved. Ryan had aged. He was 40 now, heavier than Jack remembered. The easy boyish charm he'd always had was still there around the edges, but underneath it something had collapsed, like a wall with a crack running through it. He spotted Jack sitting in the chair by the elevators and stopped. They looked at each other across the lobby. Jack didn't stand up. Ryan was. He just looked. Ryan walked over and sat down in the chair across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan said, "How are they?" And exhaled. "Good. I'm glad." "Are you?" Ryan flinched. "Of course I am. They're my parents too, Jack." "Act like it." The words landed hard. Ryan looked at the floor. "I know what you think happened," Ryan said. "I don't think anything," Jack said. "I know what happened. I need you to tell me why." Ryan was quiet for a while. Then he began to talk. Not the polished version, not the version with excuses built into the architecture. The one that came out jagged and slow, because some truths are too heavy to carry smoothly. He had made bad investments, a business venture that collapsed inside 18 months, debts that compounded, a loan he took from a man he shouldn't have borrowed from. When the pressure got unbearable, he had started taking small amounts from the account Jack funded to buy time, just until things turned around. They didn't turn around. The small amounts became larger ones. Borrowing became routine. And because Jack never came home, and their parents trusted Ryan completely, there was no one to catch it. "I kept telling myself I'd pay it back," Ryan said. "Every month I'd tell myself this was the month I'd fix it. But then what? Then it had been too long, and there was too much." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't know how to come back from it." Jack studied his brother's face. He had expected to feel rage. He had been carrying rage the entire drive from Denver. It had kept him warm on the midnight highway like a furnace in his chest. But sitting here, looking at Ryan, what he felt was something more complicated than rage. He felt grief, because this was his brother. This was the same kid who used to sit on the garage floor handing him tools when their father worked on the old Chevy. This was the same person who had cried at his own dog's funeral at age 11. This was someone he had trusted completely. And that trust was gone, not damaged, gone. "I need to know about the house," Jack said. Ryan looked up. "The property, the land. It's not in our parents' name anymore, is it?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Who did you sell it to?" "I didn't sell it." It's complicated, Ryan." Jack leaned forward. "Whatever's left of this conversation, whatever chance you have of me not walking out of here and calling every lawyer I know and burying you in paperwork for the next 5 years, it lives or dies on whether you tell me the truth right now. Your version of the truth, the actual truth." Ryan looked at him for a long time. Then slowly he began to talk. The property had been used as collateral. Desperate for capital, had convinced Robert to sign a series of documents telling him they were maintenance authorizations, renovation approvals, routine administrative things. Who had never been comfortable with paperwork and trusted his son completely, had signed without reading carefully. The documents were not what Ryan said they were. They gave Ryan limited power of attorney over specific property decisions. Using that authority, Ryan had entered into an agreement with a real estate developer named Patterson Holdings, a small regional development company that had been buying up rural properties across the county. It was structured as a deferred sale. The Reynolds property would transfer to Patterson Holdings in exchange for a cash advance Ryan received immediately. There was a narrow window for the family to reclaim it. That window was closing. Jack sat back. He ran the timeline in his head. Had been moved into the storage shed. The main house had been cleared. The land was in the process of being transferred. And Ryan had been waiting, Jack realized, for their parents to simply stop being a problem he had to manage. He didn't say that out loud. He didn't need to. "How long until the transfer is final?" Jack asked. 60 days, Ryan said. "Maybe 65. "And you didn't tell them?" Ryan said nothing. "You put him in a shed," Jack said slowly. on their own land, while a developer was preparing to take that land. And you didn't tell them. You didn't tell me. You let Mom skip her medications because she thought we didn't have money. You let Dad get sicker and sicker out there in the cold. His voice had gone very quiet, all to cover a debt you made. Ryan looked at the floor. Look at me, Jack said. Ryan looked up. You put our mother and father in a shed, Jack said. Ryan's face crumbled. For the first time, something broke through the layer of self-protection and survival mode calculation that Ryan had clearly been operating behind for years. His eyes went red. His shoulders dropped. I know, he said. It was barely a sound. I know what I did. Jack stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch his brother. He just stood there, looking down at him, and said, I need you to write down the name and contact information of the developer who processed the documents and whoever else was involved in this. Ryan blinked. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. Jack picked up his jacket. I'm going to come home. He made 2 calls from the hospital parking area before he drove back to his parents' room. It was to his attorney, David Holt. I need you to fly to Montana, Jack said. Tonight if possible. What's the situation? Fraudulent power of attorney, or misrepresented property documents, deferred sale on a family, property that should never have been entered into, possible elder financial abuse under Montana statute. Then David's voice shifted register entirely. I'll be on the first flight I can book. There's more, Jack said. I need you to bring the last 10 years of bank transfers I've made to the account under Ryan Reynolds' name. All of it. Every transaction. That's a significant amount of documentation. I know. Jack looked at the hospital entrance. I want to know exactly how significant. The second call was to a man named Marcus Webb. Marcus was the road captain of the High Ridge chapter, the largest chapter in Jack's organization based out of Bozeman. Rang twice. Boss. Marcus's voice was like gravel in a coffee can. You need something? I need you to come to Harlow Creek, Jack said. Whoever you think should be there. A beat. Family trouble? Yeah. We're on our way, that was all. That was the thing about the people Jack had built his life around. You didn't have to explain everything. You just had to make the call. And they came. He went back upstairs. His mother was sleeping when he came in. His father was awake, propped up slightly on his pillows, looking out the window with the particular 1,000-yard stare of a man whose body was resting but whose mind was going somewhere far away. Sat beside him, Pop. Robert turned his head. I know what happened, Jack said. With the house. With the money. All of it. Robert was quiet for a moment. I should have called you, he said finally. Yeah, Pop. You should have. I didn't want to be a problem for you. Jack leaned forward and put his elbows on his knees. You built me. You and Mom. You worked 26 years at that shop fixing other people's machines so I could buy my first tools. You never took a day off sick in your life. You are not a problem. His voice held steady. You are the whole reason I did any of this. You understand that? Robert didn't answer right away. Mother, he said finally. I know. He told me you were in trouble. He showed me articles on the computer. I know, Pop. I should have called you directly. The old man's voice was rough. I thought I was protecting you. Jack put his hand over his father's. You don't have to protect me anymore, he said. That's my job now. Reynolds, a man who had not cried at his own father's funeral because he said that wasn't how men from his family did things, closed his eyes. And something moved across his face that Jack had never seen before. Relief. Pure and simple and devastating. The relief of a man who had been holding something up alone for a very long time and had finally been allowed to set it down. Jack stayed beside him until his father fell asleep. Then he sat in the quiet hospital room with his parents and the machines beeping softly and the Montana sky going orange outside the window, and he made a silent promise. Not to himself, to them. I am not going anywhere. Not this time. Not until every single piece of this is made right. Outside in the parking lot, engines were beginning to arrive, one by one, then in groups. By 7 o'clock that evening, there were 34 motorcycles parked outside Harlow Creek General Hospital. Men and women in leather, drinking coffee from the gas station down the street, talking quietly, waiting, because Jack had told them why. But because Jack had called, and that was enough. When a nurse came out to ask about the gathering, Marcus Webb, 6'4" and approximately the width of a standard doorframe, smiled at her politely and said, We're here to see a family. We'll keep it down. She looked at the assembled riders. She looked at Marcus. She went back inside without another word. Inside the hospital, in a room on the third floor, Jack Reynolds sat between his parents' beds and watched them sleep. 15 years ago, he had left this town with nothing and a promise. He had kept the promise, just not the part that mattered. And now he was back. This time he wasn't leaving until the debt was paid. Not the money, the real one. The one a son owes his parents just for being exactly who they are. David Holt landed in Bozeman at 6:43 the next morning and drove straight to the hospital. He was carrying 2 laptops, a leather briefcase, and the expression of a man who had been reading documents on the plane and did not like what he found. Jack met him in the hallway outside his parents' room. They shook hands briefly, the way men do when the pleasantries have already been used up by whatever's coming next. "Talk to me," Jack said. David opened the briefcase right there in the hallway, balanced it against the wall, and pulled out a printed spreadsheet. 10 years of transfers. I had my assistant pull the full records before I boarded. He handed Jack the pages. $162,000, all sent to an account registered under Ryan Thomas Reynolds. Authorization signatures on every transfer are yours. The account was set up with a Montana routing number, local bank, small branch, the kind of place where nobody's cross-checking anything at the federal level unless someone flags it. Jack looked at the numbers without his... He set it up so it looked like a family account, David continued. To any outside observer, you were simply sending money home, which you were. The problem is where it went after it arrived. How much actually reached them? David hesitated. That hesitation told Jack everything before the number did. Based on what I can trace against actual property tax records, utility payments, and the one prescription account your mother apparently had at the pharmacy in town, somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 over the full 10 years, maybe less. Jack set the papers against the wall. He put both hands flat against them and looked at the floor for a moment. 40,000. Out of 462, is the rest, he asked. That's what I need time to trace. Some of it went to pay down debts your brother accumulated. I found 3 civil judgments filed against him in Gallatin County between 2018 and 2022. He lost each one. We're talking about a total liability somewhere around $200,000 from those alone. David paused. I think it went into the property deal. Turned. Explain. I pulled the Patterson Holdings filing from the county register last night. The deferred sale agreement was executed 14 months ago. Patterson paid Ryan a lump sum advance of $120,000. In exchange, his property, all 42 acres, the house structure on it transfers to Patterson Holdings upon completion of a development permit currently under review by the county planning board. Stared at him. He sold his parents' home, Jack said. Not a question. Technically, he leveraged a power of attorney to execute a deferred transfer on behalf of the listed owners. Whether that power of attorney was legitimately granted is the central legal question. If your father signed those documents without fully understanding their contents, and based on what you've described, that seems very likely then. We have grounds to challenge the entire transaction. How strong are those grounds? David looked at him steadily. Strong enough that I called a colleague at a firm in Helena last night, one who specializes in elder financial exploitation cases. She said if the facts are what you're describing, we're not just looking at a civil dispute. We may be looking at criminal exposure. The hallway was quiet for a moment. Down at the nurse's station, someone was talking on the phone. Rolled past them. Normal sounds, normal morning. Nothing about this morning was normal. There's one more thing, David said. Jack waited. The power of attorney document. I found a copy of it in the county records. He pulled a single sheet from the briefcase. Your father's signature is on it. I know. Ryan told me he had Dad sign things. David said carefully, is that the notarization on this document, the stamp and signature that's supposed to confirm your father signed it voluntarily in front of a licensed notary. It's registered to a notary in Helena named Derek Cole. Jack looked at the name. Something moved in the back of his memory. Cole, he said slowly. Do you know him? Jack said nothing for a moment. He was running back through years of family conversations, Christmas phone calls, names mentioned in passing by his mother. Then it landed. Derek Reynolds, he said. He changed his name. He goes by Cole now, his mother's maiden name. He's our cousin, Ryan's age. He's worked at the county office for years. David stared at him. Your cousin notarized the document, David said. If he's a licensed notary and he notarized a document for a family member, especially one he had a personal stake, and that's a violation of notarial ethics at minimum. Maximum, depending on what he knew and when, it could be construed as participating in the fraud. David closed the briefcase slowly. This is bigger than your brother acting alone. Jack looked down the hallway toward his parents' room. Through the small window in the door, he could see the shape of his mother in the bed, sitting up now, talking to a nurse. He thought about how she had looked when he found her in that shed, how thin her hands were, how carefully she had been holding that Bible, like it was the last solid thing in a world that had been quietly taken apart around her. Signed everything, Jack said. Every document, every transaction. Who signed anything related to that property or that account? I want to know who knew what and when. That's going to take time. Take the time. Jack picked up his jacket, but take it fast. He left David in the hallway and went in to see his parents. His mother was awake and more alert than the evening before. Color was coming back into her face. The IV fluids were doing their work. She had eaten a little breakfast, real food, not whatever she'd been managing to put together in that shed. And there was something in her eyes that had been missing when he found her. Focus, like a person coming back into themselves after being away somewhere. You look better, Mom, Jack said, sitting beside her. I feel better. She studied his face with the particular precision that mothers develop after decades of practice. I slept a little. You didn't sleep, she repeated. Smiled. No, I didn't. She folded her hands in her lap. Tell me what you found out. He looked at her for a moment, weighing it. She saw him weighing it. Don't do that, she said quietly. Decide what I can handle. I am 70 years old and I have handled more than you know. So he told her, not all of it, not the numbers yet, because some numbers need to be delivered after a person has had time to prepare themselves. Structure of it, the account, the years of transfers. Pretty deal. Derek. Linda Reynolds listened without interrupting. Face did not collapse. It did not crumble. It did something more controlled and more devastating, it said. Like concrete that was still soft when it was poured and is now permanent, she said when he finished. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Ryan's Aunt Carol. She used to bring food to this house when your father and I were first starting out. Anything, she'd show up with a casserole and act like it was nothing. She paused. Used to follow Ryan around like a shadow when they were boys. He still does, Jack said. How could he stopped herself? Again. How could they look at us? Come to Christmas dinner. Look your father in the eye. Jack had no answer for that. There wasn't one. Mom, the property. The deal that was made, we may be able to reverse it. David thinks the documents are challengeable. She looked at him sharply. This house, it's not gone yet. There's a window. Something shifted in her face. Not hope exactly. Something more careful than hope. The kind of emotion you hold at arm's length until it earns the right to come closer. Father built that house, she said. He framed every wall himself. He put the roof on in 3 days with 2 men he paid in beer and sandwiches. She looked at the window. He came in from the last day of that job. He sat down at the kitchen table and he cried. He never cried, but that day he did, because it was the first thing he had ever built that was truly his. Back to Jack. Get it back, she said. Simple. The voice of a woman who has made up her mind. Try. Don't try. Get it back. He looked at his mother and thought, not for the first time, that she was a great deal stronger than people had given her credit for over the years. Yes, ma'am, he said. He was almost at the door when she spoke again. Ryan, he waited. He's still my son, she said. Were not a defense. They were not an excuse. A fact she was laying on the table, the way you place something fragile down when you're not sure what to do with it yet. I know, Jack said. He went into the hallway and called Marcus. What do you need? Marcus said immediately. I need someone to find out where Ryan is staying, and I need someone to drive out to the county clerk's office when it opens and find out who else, besides Derek, had access to Reynolds' property file over the last 3 years. Pause. You want Ryan brought to you? No. I want to know where he is. That's all for now. Understood. Another pause. How are your folks? Better than last night. Good. Marcus's voice carried something that in a different man would have been sentimentality. But in Marcus Webb came out as a kind of iron steady, here, boss, whatever you need. Jack ended the call, and stood in the hallway for a moment with his phone in his hand. He had built something over 15 years that most people would have given their left arm for, a company worth real money, a reputation that preceded him into rooms he hadn't entered yet, a brotherhood of men and women who would put themselves between him and anything that came at him sideways. He had built all of it believing his parents were safe. He had sent the money and gotten the reassurance and gone back to work, because that was the deal he had made with himself, that the building was the protection. That success was the same thing as presence. He understood now, standing in a hospital hallway in the town he had fled at 23, that he had been wrong about that in the most fundamental way possible. Success was not presence. Money was not protection. And trusting someone else to love the people you loved was not the same as loving them yourself. He put the phone in his pocket and went to find coffee. He was going to need a lot of it. The day was just getting started. Arrived at the hospital at 9:15, which surprised Jack. He hadn't expected him until later. Ryan came, and he came alone. And he came without the defensive posture he'd had yesterday, the hands in pockets, the head down, the body language of a man rehearsing. He came in looking like what he was, someone who hadn't slept either, was sitting in the small family waiting area near the elevator when Ryan walked in. They looked at each other. Jack gestured to the chair across from him and sat down. For almost 30 seconds, neither of them spoke and said, "I saw Derek last night." Jack went still. "He called me," Ryan said. "He'd heard you were in town. He was asking questions about what I told you, what you were going to do." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I told him to stay out of it." "Did you tell him he was going to be named in a fraud investigation?" And looked up sharply. "Fraud investigation? What did you think was going to happen, Ryan?" "I thought I don't know what I thought." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, the mirror image of how Jack had sat with their father the night before. "I thought maybe we could fix it without it going that far. Our parents in a shed for 4 months. You stole $500,000 from me and from them over a decade. You had our cousin forge legal documents using authority Dad never understood he was giving." Jack's voice was not loud. It was something more controlled than loud. "What part of that did you think could be fixed quietly?" Ryan's jaw worked. The power of attorney wasn't forged. Dad signed it. Dad signed something. Whether he understood what he was signing is a different question. And whether Derek was legally permitted to notarize a document benefiting a family member he was actively involved with is a different question still. Jack watched his brother's face carefully. "My attorney is pulling the full file today. If those documents don't hold up, the property deal falls apart. And if the property deal falls apart and we can show intent to defraud, you are not just looking at civil liability." Quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The last of whatever armor he'd been wearing since yesterday had dropped. "I didn't start out trying to hurt them," he said. "I know, I want you to believe that." "I believe it," Jack said. "But it happened. That's what we're dealing with. What do you need from me?" Jack leaned back. He had been thinking about this since 3 in the morning, sitting in the hospital parking lot with a bad cup of coffee from the vending machine in the lobby, watching the sky start to go gray. "I need you to cooperate with my attorney. Fully. No gaps, no omission. Every document, every communication with Derek, every contact you had with Patterson Holdings. Names, dates, everything." Ryan nodded. "I need you to go see Mom and Dad." Not because I'm ordering you to. Because they're your parents. And they're in that room right now, and you need to look at them." Ryan's throat moved. "And I need you to tell me one more thing," Jack said. "Truthfully. Is there anything else? Anything at all that's connected to this that I don't know yet?" Ryan looked at him for a long time. "There might be one more thing," Ryan said quietly. Waited. "Patterson Holdings, the developer." Ryan stopped, chose his words carefully. "The man who runs it, Carl Patterson. He's not just a developer. What is he? He's been buying up properties in this county for 6 years. Always the same pattern: families in financial trouble, elderly owners, complicated title situations. He has someone on the inside at the planning board, someone who expedites permits for him." Ryan paused. "Reynolds' property isn't the only one. There are at least 4 others that I know of. Maybe more." Jack stared at his brother. "You knew this and you still did business with him." Ryan didn't look away. He didn't try to defend it. "Yes." The word sat between them like something dropped on the floor that neither of them wanted to pick up. Jack stood slowly. Add that to what you tell David, he said. Everything, all 4 properties, whatever names you know. Toward the hallway. Jack. He stopped, but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, Ryan said. I know that doesn't fix anything. Stood there for a moment. No, he said, it doesn't. He walked down the hallway toward his parents' room and didn't look back. The meeting with David Holt happened at 11. In a small conference room, the hospital let them use on the administrative floor. Jack David and a woman named Patricia Dunn, the elder exploitation specialist David had called from Helena, sat around a table covered in documents, printouts, and 2 laptops running searches on the county recorder's database. Patricia was in her 50s, sharp, the kind of woman who had sat across from a lot of people who thought they'd covered their tracks and had enjoyed the process of proving them wrong. And he was. Here's where we are, she said, pulling 3 documents to the center of the table. The power of attorney instrument is challengeable on 2 grounds. The notarization. Derek Reynolds or Derek Cole had a clear conflict of interest. He was in direct communication with Ryan Reynolds during the period when this document was executed. I have 2 text messages David's team obtained this morning that show Derek and Ryan discussing the document 3 days before it was signed. She tapped the papers, not an ethical gray area. That's a violation. The second ground, Jack asked, capacity. Your father, Robert Reynolds, based on his current medical situation and a review of his medical records from the last 2 years, was showing early-stage cognitive decline consistent with his underlying health conditions. A power of attorney executed during a period of potential cognitive impairment without independent legal counsel present is absolutely contestable. Jack absorbed that, his father's mind, something else Ryan had known about and used, about the Patterson deal. Patricia glanced at David. He was. Something moved between them, a look that said they'd already discussed this and agreed on how to present it. The deferred sale agreement, David said, is contingent on the power of attorney being valid. If we successfully challenge the instrument, the agreement has no legal foundation. Patterson Holdings would be left holding a contract that was executed based on fraudulent authority. Can they fight that? They can try. If Ryan cooperates and provides documentation of how the transaction was structured, and if the information about Patterson's pattern of buying distressed properties is as consistent as Ryan described, there may be interest from the county's office that changes the dynamic significantly. Meaning, Patterson may not want to fight a challenge in court if a fight in court opens the door to a broader investigation into his acquisition methods. Jack looked at the documents on the table. $462,000, 2 acres, a house his father built with his own hands, his mother's garden. How long to file the challenge, he asked. I can have the initial filing ready within 48 hours, Patricia said. Do it in 24, Jack said. She looked at him, not offended, recalculating. I'll need your full cooperation and access to everything Ryan provides, she said. You'll have it. She nodded once, made a note, and kept moving. Early afternoon, word had gotten around Harlow Creek that Jack Reynolds was back. This was a small town. Small towns had their own communication systems, more efficient than any app. He became aware of it when he stepped outside the hospital at 2 o'clock, and a man he vaguely recognized from childhood, Tom Brewer, who had run the hardware store for 40 years, crossed the street specifically to shake his hand. Good to see you back, Jack, Tom said. Sorry about what brought you. Thank you, Tom. Your dad fixed my first truck, $1,987. I paid him $20 because it was all I had, and he took it without making me feel like a fool about it. Tom shook his hand a second time. You need anything while you're in town, you just say it. Jack nodded. This was the other side of what he'd left behind. Not just the poverty and the small-town weight of other people's opinions, the connections, the particular texture of a community where people remembered the small things and let those things matter. His phone buzzed. Marcus, text message, found him. He's at his office. Hasn't called in sick, acting normal. Jack typed back, leave him alone for now. Let him think we don't know yet. Reply came immediately, copy. Jack stood on the sidewalk outside the hospital and looked up at the sky. He needed to move carefully here. The instinct, the one that had served him well in every difficult situation he had navigated for 15 years, was to act immediately, decisively, to show up and make the problem understand that it had made a very poor choice. But this wasn't a problem that could be solved by showing up. This needed paper and law and patience. He was not naturally a patient man. He was learning. He went back inside. His parents' attending physician stopped him in the hallway before he reached the room. "Yeah, I wanted to update you, eh?" Father's procedure went smoothly. "We drained the fluid from around the lung, and he's resting comfortably. His cardiac workup came back with some concerns, but nothing immediately critical. And we're going to want to keep him for observation for a few more days. Whatever he needs," Jack said immediately. "Whatever either of them needs. No limit on care. Talk to my assistant. She'll give you a card. This is not a financial conversation." The doctor looked at him with an expression that Jack had seen a few times before from people who worked in institutions where money was always a conversation and someone had just told them it wasn't. "Understood," she said. "Your mother is doing very well, actually. She's been asking the nursing staff questions about their schedules." A slight smile. She's organized them. Jack smiled for the first time that day. "Her," he said. He went in and found his mother sitting up with her reading glasses on, a notepad on the rolling tray table, and a nurse sitting in the chair beside her with the expression of someone who had come to check vitals and somehow agreed to describe her entire weekly routine. Jack said. "1 minute," Linda said, writing something. Looked at Jack with mild helplessness. He sat down and waited. His mother finished her note, set the pen down, thanked the nurse warmly, and watched her leave. Then she turned to Jack. "She works double shifts on Thursdays and Fridays, and nobody's recognized that she's been doing it for 4 months," Linda said, as if this were a problem Jack needed to solve immediately. "I need to talk to you." She looked at him. The notepad went back on the tray table. "Came," she said. It wasn't a question. She must have been told while he was in the meeting. "He came," Jack confirmed. "Did he see your father?" "I asked him to." "Did he pause?" "I don't know yet." Linda Reynolds looked at the window. When she looked back, her eyes were steady. "When he was 8 years old, Ryan broke the kitchen window playing ball in the yard. He came inside and told me the wind did it." She paused. "I knew he was lying. He knew I knew. But I let him believe I believed him because I could see how scared he was." Her voice was very even. "I've been letting Ryan believe I don't see things for 30 years. That was my mistake as much as anything." Jack said nothing. "You're going to get the property back," she said. "Asha thinks we have a strong case. And Ryan? What happens to him legally?" "I don't know yet. That depends on a lot of things." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not asking you to protect him from consequences. I know. But I'm asking you not to destroy him." Jack looked at his mother. Linda Reynolds, 70 years old, who had been left in a shed on her own land, who had gone without her medications, and watched her husband get sicker, and said nothing because her son told her not to be a burden, was sitting in a hospital bed asking him not to destroy the son who did it. The complexity of loving people, Jack thought. The impossible, relentless, irrational complexity of it. "I'll do what I can," he said. She reached over and put her hand on his. "That's all anyone can do," she said. The afternoon moved fast after that. David Holt called at 3:45 with news that the county attorney's office had responded to a preliminary inquiry with what David described as notable interest. Carl Patterson's name was apparently not unfamiliar to them. There were other cases in the pipeline. The Reynolds property, with its clean documentation trail and a cooperating witness in Ryan, was the kind of case that could function as a keystone. At 4:30, Patricia Dunn filed an emergency motion to halt any pending transfers related to the Reynolds property. At 5 o'clock, Ryan Reynolds sat across from David Holt and Patricia Dunn in that same hospital conference room and talked for 2 hours without stopping. Jack did not sit in on that meeting. He stayed with his parents because that was where he needed to be. At 7 in the evening, Marcus Webb knocked softly on the open door of his parents' room, hat in hand, an enormous man trying very hard to take up less space than he occupied. Robert Reynolds was awake. He looked at Marcus Webb with the unhurried assessment of a man who had spent a lifetime reading people. "With my son," he said. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "He treats you right?" Marcus glanced at Jack with something that might have been amusement in easier circumstances. "Better than anyone I've worked for before him, sir." Robert nodded slowly, satisfied, as if he needed to confirm this personally. "Good," he said. He closed his eyes again. Marcus looked at Jack. Jack tilted his head toward the hallway. They stepped out. "Cole left his office at 4:30, Marcus said quietly, "to a bar on Route 9. Has been there since. He's been making calls." Not tracking the calls, just observing. Is he nervous? I had to guess. Yes. He's on his third drink in 2 hours, and he's facing the door every time someone walks in. Waiting to see who's coming for him, Jack thought. Still hands off, Jack said. Let the lawyers work. Nodded. One more thing, Marcus said. Carl Patterson and Holdings. I had someone do some digging, public records only. He paused. He's got development projects pending on 3 other rural properties within 30 miles. 2 of them have elderly owners. One of those owners is alone, no family nearby. Jack looked at him. How'd you find that so fast? Planning board website. Public submissions. Takes about 40 minutes if you know what you're looking for. Marcus shrugged. People leave a lot of truth in public records. They just don't expect anyone to bother reading them. Jack stood there for a moment. Forward all of it to David and Patricia, he said. He did. Of course you did. Marcus almost smiled. Get some rest, boss. You look like 40 miles of bad road. Thank you, Marcus. That's very encouraging. Marcus went back down the hallway, his boots quiet for a man his size, the way men get quiet when they're in a place where quiet is what's needed. Jack went back into the room. His father was sleeping, was reading. The machines beeped softly. The light from the window was fading into early evening. He sat down between their beds. He thought about the night he'd left this town at 23. How certain he had been that building, something real, something that lasted, something that carried his name, was the way to honor where he came from. That the boy everyone had dismissed was worth the space he occupied. He had built it. He had everything he said he would. And the people he built it for had been living in a shed. He sat with that fact the way you sit with something heavy, not trying to put it down yet, just letting yourself feel the full weight of it before you figure out what to do next. His mother looked up from her book. You're thinking too loud again, she said. She went back to reading. His father breathed slowly in the bed beside him. And Jack Reynolds, Millionaire, chapter president, and that other men moved out of the way for, sat between his parents in a Montana hospital room and felt something crack open in the center of his chest that he hadn't even known was sealed. It wasn't weakness. It was the opposite of weakness. It was the feeling of finally being in the right place. And underneath everything, the fraud, the legal filings, the $462,000, the shed, the signatures, the cousin with the notary stamp, the developer with the planning board connection, underneath all of it was one simple and inescapable truth. He had been away too long. He had let distance stand in for love. And he was never making that mistake again. Patricia Dunn called at 7:42 the next morning. Jack was already awake. He had slept 3 hours on a cot. The hospital staff quietly placed in his parents' room, without being asked, one of those small human kindnesses that people in difficult places offer when they don't know what else to give. He had woken at 5 and spent the next 2 hours and 40 minutes reading through every document David had forwarded to his phone, cross-referencing names, dates, and transaction amounts, building the map of it in his head the way he built everything methodically, without rushing, until the full shape of it was clear. He stepped into the hallway to take Patricia's call. Problem, she said. Those 4 words from a woman like Patricia Dunn carried specific weight. She was not the kind of attorney who used the word problem loosely. Tell me, Jack said. The emergency motion to halt the property transfer, I filed it yesterday at 5 o'clock as planned. The court acknowledged receipt. Standard processing should have meant a temporary restraining order within 12 to 18 hours. She paused. I got a call from the court clerk 40 minutes ago. The motion has been assigned to Judge Harold Briggs. Jack waited. Harold Briggs has approved every single Patterson Holdings development permit that has come before his court in the last 4 years, Patricia said. 10 approvals, 0 denials. In a county where the average approval rate for contested rural development applications is around 60%, the landed like a flat stone on still water. Patterson owns the judge, Jack said. I cannot say that, Patricia said carefully. I can say is that the statistical pattern is extraordinary. And what I can also say is that I have already filed a motion to recuse Judge Briggs on the basis of that pattern. And I have simultaneously contacted the Montana Judicial Standards Commission. How long does recusal take? It depends on how fast we can move and how much resistance we get. Fights it. We could be looking at a week, maybe 2. And in that time, can Patterson push the transfer through? Another pause. This one told him the answer before she said it. Chooses to act before recusal is finalized technically. Yes, he has jurisdiction until he doesn't. Her voice stayed controlled but tight underneath. I want to be honest with you, Jack. We are fighting on two fronts now. The fraud case against Ryan and Derek that's strong and getting stronger. But the property itself, the physical land, the 42 acres that is now a race. Jack pressed his back against the hallway wall and looked at the ceiling. A judge. Of course there was a judge. Ryan had said Patterson had someone on the inside at the planning board. He hadn't mentioned the bench. Either Ryan didn't know or he'd left it out on purpose. What do you need from me? Jack said. Two things. Anything Ryan knows about direct contact between Patterson and Briggs. Any meeting, any communication, anything at all. If we can establish a direct link before the recusal hearing, the commission moves faster. She paused. Second, and I want you to hear this clearly before you react to it, we need to consider going public. Jack said nothing. The moment this becomes a story that other people are watching, Patricia said, the political cost of Briggs pushing through a transfer under a recusal challenge goes up dramatically. Small-town judges in Montana care about re-election. They care about what people think of them. Sunlight is the fastest disinfectant we have right now. Jack stood there for a moment. Going public meant reporters. It meant his name in the news cycle tied to his parents being found in a shed on their own land. It meant Ryan's face attached to words like fraud and exploitation. It meant everything that had happened to this family becoming content for people who had nothing to do with it. It also meant his parents' home might stay his parents' home. Give me 2 hours, he said. I need to talk to my parents first. You have 2 hours, Patricia said. After that, I need a decision. He ended the call. He stood in the hallway for exactly 30 seconds, thinking, not reacting. There was a difference, and it had taken him most of his adult life to learn it. He called Marcus. I need Ryan here now. Not a request. On it, Marcus said. Then he went in to tell his parents what was happening. His father was awake. For the first time with real alertness, the fluid drainage had made a visible difference overnight, and he was sitting up straighter, his eyes clearer, less like something being dragged up from deep water. His mother listened to everything Jack said without interrupting. Finished, Robert spoke first. How long has this judge been on Patterson's payroll? His father asked. We don't know that he is. What we know is that his record looks like he is. Same thing, Robert said. Jack almost smiled. Legally, it's not the same thing. Practically, yes, Pop. Same thing. Robert looked at his wife. Something passed between them in the way that 43 years of marriage produces a full conversation conducted entirely without words. Robert looked at Jack. Do what you have to do, he said. If people need to know what happened to us, let them know. I'm not ashamed of what happened to us. I'm not the one who should be ashamed. Jack looked at his father, Robert Reynolds, who had never in Jack's memory spoken about himself as a person deserving of sympathy or attention, who had worked his entire life in silence and never once asked to be seen. Asking to be seen now. Okay, Pop, Jack said. Okay. His mother reached over and squeezed his arm once without saying anything. He went back to the hallway and called Patricia. Do it, he said. Go public, but want the story to be about Patterson's pattern, all 4 properties, all the elderly owners, all of it. My parents are part of it, but they are not the only part. Make it bigger than one family. That's exactly the right way to frame it. Patricia said, and for the first time since he'd met her, he heard something in her voice that wasn't purely professional. I'll make some calls. Ryan arrived 20 minutes later. He came into the hospital looking like a man who had slept badly in his own guilt, which was, Jack supposed, exactly what had happened. His eyes were red at the edges. He was wearing the same jacket as the day before. Jack met him in the hallway, not the waiting room this time. He didn't want to have this conversation in a space where other people were sitting, Jack said without preamble. Ryan's face changed, just slightly, just enough. You know about Briggs, Jack said. It wasn't a question. Ryan leaned against the wall. He looked at the floor, the body language of a man who has just reached the last door in the hallway and found there's no other way to go. I knew Patterson used him, Ryan said quietly. I didn't know how deep it went, but you knew. I knew the planning board approvals always went through fast. I assumed that meant Patterson had connections. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answered. He looked up. When you're drowning and someone throws you a rope, You don't stop to ask what it's tied to. You stop, Jack said, when the rope is tied to your parents' house. Ryan said nothing. Did Patterson ever mention Briggs by name to you? One conversation, about 8 months ago. I was asking him what would happen if the property challenge came up, if someone in the family pushed back before the transfer finalized. Stopped. Say it. He said, don't worry about the courthouse. House is handled. Ryan's voice was flat and hollow. Those were his exact words. The courthouse is handled. Jack let that sit for a moment. Will you put that in writing? Sworn statement, signed, given to Patricia Dunn today. Yes, all of it. Not just Briggs. Everything Patterson said to you about the other properties, the other elderly owners. Everything he implied or stated about how he operated. Ryan looked at him for a long moment. If I do that, he said slowly, Patterson is going to come at me. He was going to come at you anyway, Jack said. The difference is whether you're standing behind me when he does or standing alone. And absorbed that. Behind you, he said. Then go find David Holt. He's in the cafeteria. Tell him you're ready to give a full statement. Pushed off the wall and started down the hallway. He stopped after 4 steps, Jack. He didn't turn around. Waited. Mom and Dad, Ryan said. Can I go see them? Jack looked at his brother's back. Yeah, he said. See them. Ryan went. Jack stood in the hallway alone for a moment. He thought about what his mother had said. He's still my son. He thought about what his father had said. I'm not the one who should be ashamed. He thought about the 8-year-old boy who broke a kitchen window and told his mother the wind did it. The boy who had followed Jack around the garage, handing him tools, wanting to be included. The boy who stood in the yard the morning Jack left and said, you'll be back, like a warning and a plan. He thought about what it must have been like to be the son who stayed. Coffee was. Watching from Harlow Creek as his brother built something real and large and respected, sending money home every month like a reminder of the distance between them, sat in the same small orbit he'd always occupied and made worse and worse decisions until the orbit collapsed entirely. Didn't forgive him, not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But he understood something about the shape of it. And understanding was a beginning, even when forgiveness was still a long road away. He went to find coffee. He was on his 2nd cup when Marcus called. We've got movement, Marcus said. Patterson? A truck from Patterson Holdings showed up at the Reynolds property 40 minutes ago. 3 men. They were measuring, walking the perimeter. One of them had a tablet, looked like he was photographing the structures. Set his cup down. They're accelerating, he said. Looks like it. They heard something is moving in the courts. Did your guys make contact? No. Observed only. Like you said, a pause. Jack, 2 of the riders who were there, they parked on the county road and just sat. Not threatening, just present. Jack thought about that. And the Patterson crew finished up faster than they probably planned, Marcus said. Left after about 25 minutes. There was something almost satisfying about that, Jack thought. Not because of intimidation, because of visibility. Because sometimes the presence of people who love you is its own kind of protection, even when no one raises a hand. Keep someone on the property, Jack said, rotating. I want that land unobserved until the court order is in place. He set, Marcus said. Jack had just stepped back into the hallway when David Holt came out of the elevator moving fast. A yellow legal pad in one hand and his phone in the other. We need to talk. I'm right here. David stopped in front of him. He looked the way he'd looked on the plane. Jack imagined like a man who'd found something in the documents he didn't expect. Statement. He's in there right now with Patricia, and he's talking, and it's everything we hoped for and then some. But that's not what I need to tell you. David glanced both ways down the hallway. The civil judgment creditors I found when I was tracing Ryan's debts, the second one, filed in 2020. The plaintiff was a company called Ridgeline Capital Partners. Know that name, Jack said. Neither did I. So I looked it up this morning while Ryan was getting here. David turned the legal pad so Jack could see what was written on it. Ridgeline Capital Partners is a holding entity registered in Delaware. Minimal public footprint. But when you dig into the registered agent and the principal officers, one of the names that comes up as a managing member is Carl Patterson. Jack looked at the legal pad. Carl Patterson, the developer who was buying his parents' land. Patterson was one of Ryan's creditors, Jack said. Not just one of them. Based on the judgment amount and some additional liens I found, this morning Patterson may have been Ryan's primary creditor. meaning Ryan didn't just coincidentally do business with Patterson after getting into debt. Patterson may have been the one who got Ryan into debt in the first place. David paused. At minimum, was positioned to capitalize on it once it happened. The hallway was very quiet for a moment. Jack stood very still. He was rearranging the architecture of what he thought he understood about this situation. He had been thinking of Ryan as the primary actor, the one who made the bad choices, created the debt, and then reached for his parents' property as the solution. Patterson as an opportunist who happened to be there when Ryan needed out. But what if it was the other way around? What if Patterson had found Ryan first? Is there a connection between Patterson and Derek? Jack asked. I'm looking, David said. I don't have it yet, but I'm looking. Faster. David was already moving back toward the elevator. Jack stood in the hallway. If Patterson had targeted Ryan, identified him as someone in financial trouble, someone with access to a valuable rural property, someone with an elderly dependent family that could be leveraged, then this was not just fraud within a family. This was predation, deliberate systematic predation by someone who had been doing it for years. 4 other properties, 14 favorable court rulings, a judge in his pocket, a cousin with a notary stamp, and a younger brother drowning in debt who just needed someone to throw him a rope. House is handled. Jack thought about what kind of man says those words that casually. What kind of man builds a system that depends on other people's desperation and other people's families? He thought about the 3 other elderly property owners Marcus had identified from the planning board filings. He took out his phone and called Patricia. The other properties, he said, other families. Do they have legal representation? No, Patricia said. I'd have to check. And if they don't find them, today, I want anyone Patterson has done this to have someone in their corner. Pause. That's going to expand the scope of this significantly, Patricia said. I want it expanded. I want Patterson looking at something so large he can't see the edges of it. Another pause. All right, she said, I'll make the calls. And Patricia, the media contacts you mentioned. Who are you thinking? I know a reporter at the Helena Independent Record. She's been covering rural property rights issues for 3 years. She's credible, she's thorough, and she's been looking for a case with enough documentation to print a real story rather than speculation. Set up the call, Jack said. This afternoon if possible. He hung up and went back toward his parents' room. Ryan was in there when he arrived. He was sitting in the chair beside their father's bed, the chair Jack had occupied for 2 days. Robert was awake, and they were talking. Quietly. The conversation of men who are not naturally talkers and have something enormous between them that neither quite knows how to address directly. Jack stopped in the doorway and watched for a moment without going in. He heard his father say, "You should have come to me," and said, "I know, Dad. I'm your father. That's what I'm for." Silence. I was ashamed, Ryan said. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then, in the voice of a man choosing his words the way he would choose a tool carefully, for a specific purpose, he said, "Principle, shame is a private thing. What you did to your mother and me was not a private thing." I nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just nodded. "You're here now," Robert said. Jack stepped back from the doorway. He didn't need to be in that room for that conversation. Some things a father has to say to a son without the other son watching. He sat in the hallway on one of the chairs that lined the wall and let it happen. Marisha's media contact, a woman named Sarah Greer, called at 2 in the afternoon. Jack was on a second legal call with David when she called, so Marcus took it first, which Jack had not planned but turned out to be ideal because Marcus Webb describing a situation had a particular clarity and credibility that came from a man who chose his words like he chose everything, with the understanding that he was accountable for each one. When Jack called Sarah Greer back at 3:15, she already had the basic shape of the story, and she had one specific question. I want to write this story. I think it needs to be written. I want to ask you directly, are you doing this to protect your family or to hurt your brother? Jack sat with the question for a moment. Both of those things existed at the same time, he said. But I'm going to tell you what I told my attorney this morning. I want the story to be about Patterson, about the pattern, about what happens to elderly people in rural counties when someone with money and a courthouse connection decides their land is worth more than they are. My parents are part of that story, but they're not a weapon. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. That's the right answer. It's also the true one. Always the same thing. In this case, they are. She said she would need 48 hours to verify documentation independently before she could run anything. You'll have full access to David Holt, Jack said. He has everything. And your brother? Will he speak? I'll ask him. He found Ryan in the cafeteria an hour later, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The reporter wants to know if you'll talk to her, Jack said, sitting across from him. Ryan looked up. What would I say? The truth. Jack wrapped both hands around his own cup. Truth, including how Patterson found you, including how the debt started, including what you did and why you did it and what it cost. Quiet for a long time. If I do that publicly, he started. You'll have a harder time pretending it didn't happen, Jack finished. Ryan's jaw tightened. Ryan, you can spend the rest of your life carrying this in the dark. You can put it in the light and let it be what it is, a terrible mistake that a person made and then did everything in his power to make right. Jack paused. Choices leaves you somewhere different in 5 years than the other one, and looked down at his cup. Mom would want me to, he said quietly. Jack said, she would. Ryan looked up. Does she know you're asking me? But she already told me she's not asking me to protect you from consequences. She's asking me not to destroy you. Jack held his brother's gaze. This isn't destruction. This is the opposite of it. If you want a chance at something real on the other side of this, you need to stop hiding. Ryan sat there for another full minute. Okay, he said. I'll talk to her. The motion to recuse Judge Briggs was heard the following morning. Jack was not in the courtroom. Patricia had told him his presence specifically. His presence with however many riders happened to be in Harlow Creek at that moment would not help the legal argument and might actively distract from it. He stayed at the hospital. But Marcus Webb, who had a talent for being in rooms without being noticed that seemed physically impossible for a man of his dimensions, was in the public gallery. He texted Jack updates every 20 minutes. At 10:14, Briggs is listening. Happy. 10:41, Patterson's attorney just objected to the statistical analysis. Judge overruled him. Interesting. At 11:03, Briggs just called a recess. At 11:22, back in session. At 11:38, Marcus sent a single word, done, stared at the screen. His phone rang. Patricia. Briggs recused himself, she said. Jack exhaled slowly. The case has been reassigned to Judge Catherine Morales out of Missoula. She has no prior rulings on Patterson Holdings cases. The temporary restraining order on the property transfer has been granted effective immediately. Patricia's voice was as close to elated as it ever got, which meant it was brisk and precise and had a slight charge of energy underneath the professionalism. The land is frozen. Patterson cannot move on it. Time in 4 days. Jack felt something in his chest release. Not everything, not even most of it, but some. How did Briggs explain the recusal? Conflict of interest related to prior rulings. He kept it vague, which is what I expected. He's not going to go down voluntarily, but he also knows the Judicial Standards Commission is already looking at the pattern, and he's not going to sit in a case that's about to become a news story. He knows, his attorney does. By now, yes. How does Patterson respond to that? That, Patricia said, is what I'd like to see. Jack sat for a moment. 48 hours ago, he'd been sitting in a conference room in Denver signing a $4 million contract. He had felt completely in control of his life. He thought about what it had taken to get here. The midnight ride, the shed, his father's labored breathing, his mother's cold hands, the Bible in her lap. $30,000 to $40,000 out of 462. A cousin with a notary stamp, a judge who approved 14 permits without blinking, a developer who called his parents' home a development opportunity and called the courthouse handled. He thought about Ryan sitting in the cafeteria with cold coffee. Asha, he said, yes? Tell me honestly, when this is done, all of it, the fraud case, the property challenge, Patterson, what does Ryan realistically face? Asha was quiet for a moment. The careful quiet of someone who respects the person they're talking to enough not to soften the answer. Operating fully, as he's doing, helps significantly. Financial abuse under Montana statute carries civil liability. Criminal exposure depends on how aggressively the county attorney's office wants to pursue it, and that depends partly on how much they want Ryan as a witness against Patterson. She paused. Honest assessment is that Ryan will face real consequences. financial restitution at minimum. Probation is probable, incarceration possible, but less likely if he remains fully cooperative and the Patterson case becomes the primary focus. Derek's situation is more precarious. He's a licensed public official. The notary violation alone is grounds for professional decertification. If we can establish he knew the full scope of what the documents were being used for, and based on those text messages, I think we can. His criminal exposure is meaningful. Jack nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see it. One more question, he said. Patterson himself. Ryan's statement holds up and it will. And if Sarah Greer's story runs, and the other affected families come forward, and if the Judicial Standards Commission finds what I think they're going to find about Briggs, then Carl Patterson is looking at a federal pattern of fraud case, a county civil dispute, a federal case. She let that land. House is handled, Jack said. Not anymore, Patricia said. He ended the call. He sat very still for a moment. Then he got up, went down the hallway, and pushed open the door to his parents' room. His father was sitting up. His mother was beside him on the edge of the bed, one hand over his, both of them looking at the window. He was. They had been talking, he could tell, but they weren't talking now. They were just sitting together the way long married people do in the comfortable silence of two people who have said most of what needed to be said over 43 years and can afford, now, to just be in the same room. Both looked at Jack when he came in. He looked at their faces, his father's face, older and thinner than the man he'd left, but still carrying that particular structure of stubborn dignity that Robert Reynolds had never once let go of. Face, watching him with that had always seen more than people gave them credit for. The property transfer is frozen, Jack said. Legally, as of this morning, nobody can touch that land. Closed her eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel the full weight of it. His father looked at him steadily. The house? Robert asked. Yeah, Jack said. But we're getting there. Robert nodded once. Then he said something he had never, in Jack's memory, said in exactly these words. Out of you, son. Jack stood in the doorway and held those words. He had built a company. He had earned a reputation. He had shaken hands with people whose names were in newspapers and walked into rooms that opened for him because of what he had made of himself from nothing. But he had never heard those words from his father. Not like that. Not with that simplicity. He crossed the room and sat beside them. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Outside in the hallway, the hospital moved through its afternoon rhythms. Somewhere in Helena, Sarah Greer was verifying documents and preparing a story that would run in 48 hours and change a lot of things for a lot of people. Somewhere across town, Carl Patterson was in a meeting with his attorney, learning that his courthouse wasn't handled anymore. Somewhere in the building, Ryan Reynolds was sitting with David Holt, going through every communication he had ever had with Ridgeline Capital Partners and Patterson Holdings, laying out a decade of bad decisions with the particular painful precision of a man who has finally decided that the truth costs less than the lies. And in a hospital room in Harlow Creek, Montana, Jack Reynolds sat between his parents and let the afternoon go quiet around them. He thought about what his mother had said. He's still my son. He thought about what his father had said this morning to Ryan. You should have come to me. That's what I'm for. He thought about what it meant to be a family. The word, not the concept. The actual thing, the living thing that exists in the specific weight of a hand, the specific sound of a voice you've known since before you understood the concept of knowing. It was not simple. It was not clean. It was $462,000. And a judge in someone's pocket, and a cousin with a stamp, and a brother drowning in choices he never should have made. And it was also this room, these two people, this silence. At the same time, permanently, Jack understood that now in a way he hadn't understood anything in a long time. And in the parking lot below the window, 3 motorcycles sat in quiet rows, their riders moving in and out on rotation, keeping watch over a family that was finally, after too long, and at too high a cost, and with too much still left to be repaired together in the same place at the same time. Greer's story ran on a Thursday morning. Jack knew it was live before Patricia called him, because Marcus sent a text at 6:47 that said simply, "It's out. It's big." He read it on his phone sitting in the hospital cafeteria with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched yet. The headline was clean and specific in the way that good journalism is not sensational, not soft. It named Patterson Holdings. It named the 4 properties. It named the pattern. It named Judge Briggs by his statistical record without accusing him of anything that wasn't already in the public filing. It quoted Ryan by name, his own words, unedited, the full weight of what he had done and why, sitting there in black and white for anyone to read. And it quoted Robert Reynolds, one line. His father had agreed to one line when Sarah Greer had called his hospital room 2 days earlier. Jack read it 3 times. My son built that house with his own hands. No piece of paper signed by someone who didn't understand what he was signing is going to change that. Jack set the phone down. He sat with his coffee for a full minute, picked the phone back up because it had been buzzing continuously since he set it down, and it showed no signs of stopping. Tricia called at 6:52. The county attorney's office called me at 6:15. Before the story even ran online, someone sent them an advance copy. Her voice had that charged precision again. They want a meeting today. They're opening a formal investigation into Patterson Holdings. This is moving. How fast? Faster than I expected. The Briggs connection scared people. When a judge is involved, everyone in the county system who's been approving Patterson's permits quietly is suddenly very motivated to be on the right side of the story. Jack thought about how many decisions in life came down to exactly that, not conscience, not principle, but the cold calculation of which side you wanted to be standing on when the light came on. What do you need from me today? He asked. Nothing right now. Let it move. You've done the work. This is the part where the system does its job. A brief pause, assuming it does, and if it doesn't, then we make it louder, Patricia said. I think it will. He ended the call and looked at the phone screen. 7 missed calls, 11 text messages from numbers he didn't recognize, 4 from journalists whose names he recognized from national outlets. The story had been picked up in the first hour. The phone face down on the table. The story was out, filed. The investigation was open. The land was frozen. Ryan was cooperating. Derek had retained an attorney, which meant Derek was scared, which meant Derek knew exactly what he had done. The machinery was moving, and Jack Reynolds, who had spent 15 years building an empire by being the hardest working man in whatever room he occupied, had nothing to do right now but sit with a cup of cold coffee in a hospital cafeteria and wait. He was not good at waiting. He went upstairs. His mother was already dressed. When he came in, the hospital had brought her clothes, a small bag that Mrs. packed from the neighbor's house, and she was sitting in the chair beside his father's bed with her reading glasses on, looking at something on the phone Jack had brought her 2 days ago. When she mentioned she wanted to be able to call people, Jack said, I read it. She set the phone in her lap. He spelled your father's name right. That's more than most people manage. Jack sat on the edge of the empty bed across from her. How does you feel about it? She considered the question seriously, the way she considered most things. I feel like I want to go home, she said. I know. That home. Not what it is right now. She folded her glasses. It was. What your father made it. We're working on that. I know you are. She looked at him with that precise measuring look. I also know that even if we get every acre back and put every wall back the way it was, it won't be exactly the same thing. Because something happened to it. She paused. Something happened to us. Jack looked at his mother. Does that make you angry? He asked. She thought about it. Yes, she said simply. It makes me very angry. I've been angry since about 2 in the morning the night before last, and I expect I'll be angry for a while longer. She met his eyes. I've been alive long enough to know that anger is only useful if you point it in the right direction. Right direction right now is that courtroom and that investigation and whatever comes next for Patterson. She paused. Jack nodded slowly. Mom, what Ryan did. I know what Ryan did, she said. Not sharp, just final. The voice of a woman who has processed something completely and does not need it explained back to her. I know exactly what he did. I sat in that shed for 4 months and I knew something was wrong, and I let him tell me it wasn't because I didn't want to believe my son was capable of it. Her chin lifted slightly. It's on me too. It's not on you, Jack said immediately. Don't tell me what's on me, she said gently, but without any room for argument. I'm his mother. I know him. I chose to not see what I was seeing. That's a choice I made, and I'll carry it. She held his gaze. I will not do is let that choice become the reason I burn him to the ground on top of everything else. Jack sat with that for a moment. He's talking to Sarah Greer's editors today, Jack said. Extended interview, everything. He specifically asked to do it. Something moved across his mother's face. He asked. His idea, not mine. Linda Reynolds looked at the window for a moment. He turned back. The anger was still there. It didn't go anywhere. But alongside, it was something else. The complicated, specific grief of a parent who loves a child that has disappointed them in the most fundamental way possible and refuses, even now, to stop. She said quietly, "That's good." Robert's voice came from the bed, rough from sleep but fully alert. "Is it on the news?" he asked. Jack looked at his father. "Pop, it's on the news." Robert closed his eyes and opened them again. "Good," he said, the exact same word his wife had just used, the same way she'd said it. 43 years together, Jack thought. You start to inhabit each other's language without knowing it. Buzzed, he looked at it. "David Holt, call me now." He stepped into the hallway. "Talk to me," Jack said. Cole walked into the county attorney's office 40 minutes ago with his personal attorney, David said. "He's offering a full cooperation agreement." Jack stopped walking. "He's flipping," he said. "Completely. And Jack, he knows more than we thought. He wasn't just the notary. Patterson used Derek as a go-between for at least 2 of the other property acquisitions, was passing documents between Patterson's people and the property owners. He was present at meetings Ryan didn't even know about. Jack stood very still. Patterson's running Derek independently from Ryan, Jack said slowly. 2 separate channels into the same family. That's exactly what it looks like. Was the inside man on your parents' property, specifically. Derek was the infrastructure guy, the one who knew the county systems, the filing procedures, who to talk to, which windows to go through. David paused. Which means Patterson didn't just find Ryan and exploit him. Patterson built a system. And Derek was a load-bearing part of it. The shape of it was fully visible now, Jack thought. All of it, the whole architecture. Patterson had found Derek first, probably. A county office employee with access to property records, filing systems, the daily machinery of rural land administration. From Derek, he would have known which families were behind on taxes, which properties had unclear title situations, which elderly owners had no nearby family to notice what was happening. And then Derek had pointed him at Ryan, his own cousin. "Derek knew what was happening to my parents," Jack said. It wasn't a question. Based on what his attorney indicated this morning, yes. He knew they had been moved out of the house. He knew the timeline. He made sure the county records didn't flag anything unusual during the transition period. David's voice was careful. Derek didn't just notarize a document. He actively managed the paper trail to protect the deal. Jack leaned against the hallway wall. He thought about Derek Cole at family Christmases, at 4th of July gatherings in the yard behind this very hospital. A quiet kid who followed Ryan around like a shadow. Up and changed his name and got a county job and became, apparently, the administrative arm of a man who preyed on elderly rural families. He thought about his mother saying, Derek's mother used to bring casseroles. "What does Derek's cooperation give us on Patterson?" Jack asked. "Everything," David said. "Meeting notes, email chains he preserved, conversations he documented, because this is the part that's almost hard to believe. Apparently, Derek started keeping records about 18 months ago when he got nervous about his exposure. He has documentation of Patterson explicitly directing him to manage county records related to at least 3 properties. He has a text exchange in which Patterson references Judge Briggs by name and describes their arrangement. Jack's hand tightened on the phone. He has Patterson describing the Briggs arrangement in writing. Message, yes. The hallway was very quiet. "David," Jack said. "I know," David said. "That's not a county fraud case anymore." David agreed. "That's a federal case. Judicial corruption, racketeering, wire fraud across multiple transactions. County attorney's office is going to be handing this to the FBI by end of day." Jack stood in the hospital hallway in Harlow Creek, Montana, and felt the full momentum of what had been set in motion. He had come here for his parents. He had come because a neighbor's shaking voice on a phone at midnight told him something was wrong, and he had ridden through the dark and found his father barely breathing on a mattress on the floor of a storage shed, and his mother with cold hands and a Bible in her lap. He had come for 2 people. What was ending was something much larger than 2 people. "Keep me updated," he said. "Every step," David confirmed. Jack put the phone in his pocket. He stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he went back into his parents' room and sat down and didn't say anything about the call yet. Some information needed to settle before it got spoken out loud. Some things you carry for a few minutes before you share them, because sharing them makes them permanent in a different way. His father was looking at him. Robert Reynolds had always been able to read his sons, not through conversation. He was not a man of long conversations, but through the specific attention of a man who worked with his hands and understood that what a thing looks like on the outside tells you something real about what's happening inside. News? Robert said. Jack looked at his father. Pop, he said. Good news. Robert nodded. That was enough. The meeting with the county attorney happened at 2 in the afternoon without Jack. Asha and David handled it. They were in there for 3 hours. When Patricia called afterward, her voice had finally fully crossed the line from professional into something adjacent to joy. The FBI field office in Helena has been contacted, she said. The county attorney is cooperating fully. They're treating this as a joint investigation. Patterson's business accounts have been flagged for review, and his pending development permits are on administrative hold, pending the outcome of the investigation. She paused. The Reynolds property challenge goes to Judge Morales next week. Patricia's brief is prepared. Based on Derek's cooperation and Ryan's testimony, she thinks we have better than 90% odds of full recovery. House, Jack said. The house, the land, all 42 acres. Full restoration of title to Robert and Linda Reynolds. Sat with that for a moment. The house his father built, where his mother grew flowers every spring. Shop, where Robert Reynolds had fixed other people's machines for 40 years and asked for nothing more than fair payment and the satisfaction of work done right. All of it coming back. There's one more thing, Patricia said. Restitution calculation. Based on the full financial audit, what Ryan took from the transfers, what Derek facilitated, what Patterson profited from the advance payment, the civil liability total is substantial. If the criminal case results in restitution orders, your parents could recover a significant portion of what was taken. I don't want their retirement defined by a restitution check, Jack said. I understand that. I'm just telling you what's available. Make sure the other families know what's available for them, Jack said. They've been waiting longer than my parents. They go first. All right, Patricia said quietly. And Patricia, you've done this week. Don't, she said. This is the job. This is what the job is supposed to look like. Another pause. It just doesn't always. He found Ryan in the hospital chapel at 4 o'clock. Sure why he went there. He didn't plan it. He was walking the hallway on the second floor, passing the small room with the open door that hospitals keep for exactly the moments when people need a place to be that isn't a room and isn't a hallway. And he looked in, and Ryan was sitting in one of the chairs with his hands folded, not praying exactly, just sitting in the particular stillness of a man who has said everything he has to say and has nothing left to do but wait for it to matter. Jack went in. He sat 2 chairs down from his brother. They sat together without speaking for a minute. Then Ryan said, Derek called me this morning. He went to the attorney's office. He told me what he was going to do. Did you try to talk him out of it? Jack asked. No. Ryan shook his head slowly. I told him it was the right thing. Jack looked at the front of the room. The FBI is involved now, Jack said. It's bigger than the county. Ryan absorbed that. His hands tightened slightly in his lap, then relaxed. Patterson, he said. Patterson, Jack confirmed, and nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who has spent a week watching a wave he set in motion grow larger than he ever intended and has made his peace with it. He found me on purpose, Ryan said. Not for the first time, but with a different weight than before. The weight of something fully believed rather than suspected. I know that now. I've been going over the timeline, the way he approached me, the way the debt structured itself. He was building toward my parents' property from the beginning, Jack said. I let him use me. Yes, Ryan looked at his hands. I was so convinced that I was the one making choices. I was the one in control of the situation. Even when everything was falling apart, I told myself I was managing it. He paused. I wasn't managing anything. I was a door he walked through. Jack looked at his brother. There was something both true and incomplete about what Ryan was saying. It was true that Patterson had targeted him. It was also true that Ryan had walked through the door voluntarily, had kept walking, had made the specific choice every day for years to keep moving in the direction he was moving. Things were true. Jack had spent a week being furious about one of them. He thought it might be time to acknowledge the other. When this is over, Jack said, I want you to come work with me, and looked up sharply. Not running anything, Jack said immediately. I'm not handing you authority I'd have to watch. I'm talking about work, building something, earning something back. He paused. You know motorcycles, you know engines. You learned from the same man I did. Ryan stared at him. Why, he asked. The question was honest, not suspicious, just genuinely confused. Because Mom asked me not to destroy you, Jack said. And because Dad told Ryan this morning that's what he's for. And because he stopped. Started again. Because you're my brother. And that doesn't go away, it just changes shape. Ryan's jaw worked. I won't make the same mistakes, he said. No, Jack agreed. You'll make different ones. So will I. That's what people do. He paused. But you make them standing in the light this time, not in the dark. Ryan looked at the front of the small room for a long moment. He said finally, okay. They sat there together in the quiet for another minute. Two brothers in a hospital chapel in the town they both grew up in, on the other side of something enormous, trying to figure out what the other side looks like. Looked simple. It didn't look clean. It looked like what it was, a real thing, with real damage, and real people, and the very slow, difficult process of deciding that the thing is worth repairing. Jack stood up. Come have dinner with Mom and Dad tonight, he said. Ryan nodded. Jack walked out of the chapel and back into the hallway. And somewhere in Helena, in a federal building, a case file with Carl Patterson's name on it was being opened. And in a county recorder's office, the Reynolds property records were sitting behind a legal hold that nobody was going to move. And in a hospital room on the third floor, Robert and Linda Reynolds were waiting for their sons to come home for dinner, which Jack thought, walking down the hallway toward the elevator, was everything. Not the only thing, but everything. Dinner that evening was not what any of them would have called a normal meal. It happened in Robert's hospital room because he still couldn't walk the hallways comfortably, and because Linda refused to leave his side for a meal, and because the nursing staff who had by this point developed a collective soft spot for the Reynolds family that defied standard hospital protocol, quietly allowed 4 people to sit in a room designed for one patient and share food that Mrs. had driven over in containers from her own kitchen. She had made pot roast, cornbread, green beans with bacon the way Linda had taught her 20 years ago. When she arrived and set the containers on the rolling tray table, Linda looked at her for a long moment and then reached out and held both of her hands and didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say that the gesture didn't already contain. Mrs. Marsh patted Linda's hands, told Robert he looked better than she expected, nodded once at Jack, and looked at Ryan for exactly 3 seconds, with the particular expression of a woman who has lived long enough to know that some things need to be said with a look rather than words. Then she left because she understood that what this family needed now was the room to itself. They ate. For a while, no one said anything significant. Robert asked about the pot roast. Linda told him not to eat too fast. Jack refilled cups. Ryan passed the cornbread without being asked because he still remembered who wanted it first from 30 years of the same dinner table. Small things, normal things, the kind of things that feel like nothing until you have been without them long enough to understand they are everything. It was Robert who broke the surface. He set his fork down around the room at his wife and his 2 sons, and said, I want to know one thing. Everyone looked at him. The man, Patterson, his voice was even. Off he was. What happens to him? Jack had been waiting for this question from his father since the cafeteria call with David that morning. He had decided, sitting with it all afternoon, that Robert Reynolds deserved the full answer. The FBI has his financial records, Jack said. Derek's cooperation gave them documented proof of the Briggs arrangement. Text messages. Patterson explicitly described paying for judicial favor in writing. He paused. He did that to himself. Nobody trapped him. He just believed he was too far inside his own system to ever get caught. Robert was quiet for a moment. And the other families, the other properties. All 4 cases are part of the federal investigation. The families have legal representation now. Patricia coordinated it. Robert picked his fork back up. Good, he said. That was all. That single word, delivered with the finality of a man who had said what needed to be said and was now ready to eat his pot roast. Ryan was looking at his father, and something in Ryan's face was shifting the last layer of whatever protective distance he'd been maintaining since he walked into this room, crumbling at the edges. Ryan said. Robert looked at him. I need to say something to you. He set his own fork down, looked at his mother, then back at his father. I've said I'm sorry. I've said it to Jack, to the attorneys, to the reporter. I've said it to myself about 400 times in the last week. He stopped. His voice was steady, but the steadiness was the kind you maintain through effort, not the kind that comes naturally. I haven't said it to you directly. Looking at you. It was very still. What I did to you, Ryan said, I let happen to you. The shed, the medications, the house. He stopped again, started again. There is no version of a reason that makes that okay. And I know that. I need you to know that I know that. Because it changes anything, but because you deserve to hear it from me, face to face, not in a legal statement and not through Jack. Linda Reynolds set her container of food on the tray table. She looked at her younger son for a long moment. Then she said, come here. Ryan looked at her. I said, come here, Ryan. He got up from the chair by the window and crossed the room, and his mother took his face in both hands the way she had when he was 8 years old and told him the wind broke the window, and she had chosen to believe him. The same hands, thinner now, colder than they used to be, but holding his face with the same specific gravity they always had. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, you are my son. You were my son before you made these choices, and you are my son after them. That is not negotiable, and it is not something you get to take from me by being wrong. Her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't waver. What you did was terrible. I am going to be angry about it for a long time. I am going to love you for exactly as long as I am going to be angry about it, which is the rest of my life. She paused. Stand me? Ryan couldn't speak. He nodded. She let go of his face. Now sit down and eat, she said. The food's getting cold. He sat down. He didn't try to hide that he was crying, which was something Jack had not seen his brother do since they were children. Robert Reynolds looked at his younger son across the room, and Jack watched his father make a decision in real time, the visible, quiet decision of a man choosing the harder path over the easier one. Mother's right, Robert said. Eat the food. And somehow, in the particular language of the Reynolds family, that was forgiveness. The full thing, not the clean thing. But the beginning of it, offered across a hospital room over pot roast and cornbread from a neighbor who had been paying attention for 32 years when the family itself hadn't been. Jack sat quietly in his corner and let it happen. He thought about what his father had said to him 2 days ago. Out of you, son. He thought about what his mother had said. That's what I'm for. He thought about Ryan in the chapel, saying Patterson walked through me like a door, with the specific anguish of a man who is finally seeing himself clearly. He thought about 15 years of money sent home and a brother's voice saying, don't worry, they're fine, focus on your business. He thought about riding out of this town at 23 on a motorcycle he'd fixed 3 times. He thought about all the things he'd built and all the things he'd left behind in the building. He didn't say any of it. He just ate his dinner with his family in a hospital room in Montana and let that be enough for tonight. 2 weeks later, Judge Catherine Morales ruled in favor of Robert and Linda Reynolds. Full title restoration. All 42 acres, every structure. Retroactive to the date of the fraudulent power of attorney instrument, which the court found had been executed under conditions of misrepresentation and without independent legal counsel for the signatories, rendering it void. All Patterson's attorneys filed an immediate appeal. The appeal was denied within 72 hours by a panel that had read Derek Cole's cooperation documents and decided unanimously that there was nothing in the record worth preserving. Patterson Holdings' pending permits were canceled. The company's accounts remained under federal freeze. Patterson himself was out on bail on charges that included racketeering, fraud, judicial corruption facilitation, and elder financial exploitation, a list long enough that his attorney had stopped trying to count them publicly. Judge Briggs resigned from the bench on a Tuesday morning with a statement that cited personal reasons. The Montana Judicial Standards Commission issued a formal finding the following week that used different language than personal reasons. Cole received a suspended sentence and 5 years probation. He lost his notary license, his county position, and a significant portion of his reputation in a town where people had long memories. He moved to Billings within the month. Jack did not pursue him further. Marisha had asked if he wanted to, and Jack had said no. Derek had burned himself down adequately without any help. Ryan's situation took longer to resolve. It always does when the truth is complicated, and the paperwork reflects that. The civil liability was real and substantial. Restitution order covered the bulk of what he had taken from the transfer account over the years, structured as a payment plan that would take time but was achievable if he worked and was honest and didn't disappear into another bad decision. The county attorney's office, satisfied with Ryan's cooperation in the Patterson case, declined to pursue criminal charges, but made clear in their filing that the decision was contingent on continued compliance and full restitution. Ryan called Jack the day the order was finalized. "I start work next month," he said. "If the offer still stands." "It stands," Jack said. "Earn it," Ryan said. "Every dollar." "I know you're not handing me anything." Jack confirmed, "I'm not." "Good." A pause. "That's the right call." Jack almost smiled. "I know." There was a brief silence between them, not uncomfortable, just real. The particular silence of two people who have been through something enormous together and are still figuring out what the other side of it sounds like. "Mom and Dad?" Ryan asked. "Come see them," Jack said. The answer to that question. Always going to be the answer to that question. Ryan said, "Okay, yeah." He came the following weekend. The house was not ready yet. The restoration work had started, and Robert had very specific opinions about how it was being done and had been driven out to supervise twice already. Despite his doctor's recommendations, which Linda relayed to Jack with the specific tone of a woman who is simultaneously exasperated and deeply relieved, but Jack had found his parents a small rental house in Harlow Creek, close to Mrs., close to the hospital for follow-up appointments, close enough to the property that Robert could drive past it and watch the work taking shape. When Ryan arrived that Saturday morning, Linda answered the door. She looked at him for a moment. Then she stepped aside and let him in. That was all. But it was not a small thing. Jack watched it from the kitchen doorway and understood that this was what his mother had meant when she said she would be angry and loving at the same time for the rest of her life. Both things inhabiting the same action. A door opened, let in, without forgetting, without pretending, just choosing one more time the harder and more honest path. Robert was in the living room. He looked up when Ryan came in. "Late," Robert said. He had told Ryan to be there at 9 and had arrived at 9:03. "3 minutes," Ryan said. 3 minutes is 3 minutes. Ryan sat down. "You're right. I'm sorry." Robert looked at him for a moment. Then he picked up the coffee mug on the table beside him and said, "Get yourself a cup. Things I want to talk to you about." Ryan got up and went to the kitchen. He passed Jack in the doorway, and they exchanged a look, the specific look of two brothers in a family kitchen that requires no translation. Jack stepped aside and let him through. 6 months after the night Jack had ridden back to Harlow Creek on a midnight highway, following a neighbor's shaking voice on a phone, he sat on the back porch of his parents' rental house in the early evening with his mother and a cup of coffee that was actually good this time. Restoration of the main house was nearly complete. Robert had, against medical advice and with Linda's resigned acceptance, personally overseen the replacement of the front porch railing. He said the contractor was doing it wrong and he was correct, and the contractor had eventually admitted it, and the two of them had apparently spent a companionable afternoon doing it right together. Linda told this story with the expression of a woman who had long ago stopped being surprised by her husband and had graduated into something deeper than surprise, which was love at its most settled and specific form. "He's happy," she said, "driving everyone crazy, but happy. That's his natural state," Jack said. "Always was." She sipped her coffee. "You're going back to Denver next week." It wasn't a question. She had always known his schedule better than he announced it. "Yes," he said, "but I'm coming back in 3 weeks. The week after that, I'm doing the quarterly review. View from here, David can run the Denver office for a week." She looked at him. "You don't have to rearrange your life," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not rearranging it. I'm arranging it. There's a difference." She held her coffee cup in both hands. "When you left at 23, she said, I cried for 3 days after you were gone. I didn't want you to see me cry because I didn't want you to feel guilty. I wanted you to go." She paused. You had to go. I know, Mom. I always hoped you'd come back. She looked at him. Not because we needed the money. Not because we needed fixing. Just because. She stopped. A house with your children in it is a different kind of house than one without. Jack looked at his mother. I'm coming back, he said. Not just for visits. I'm looking at property here. I want a base here. The company has an office in Bozeman that I can run operations from half the year if I restructure the regional management. He paused. I should have done it 5 years ago. I didn't because I told myself the business needed me there. The truth is I was afraid of what coming back meant. What did it mean, she asked. He sat with the question. That I'd have to look at what I'd missed, he said. That being home meant admitting I should have been home sooner. Linda Reynolds nodded slowly. You're here now, she said. Yeah, then that's when you're here. She reached over and put her hand on his arm. People spend too much time apologizing to the past. Past doesn't need the apology. The people in front of you do. He looked at his mother, 70 years old, smaller than she used to be. Hands that were warmer now than when he'd found her, but still thinner than they should be. Still carrying the evidence of months of cold and fear and quiet endurance that no restitution order and no court ruling would fully erase. Still sharper than anyone he'd ever met. I love you, Mom, he said. She patted his arm once. I know you do, she said. You always did. You just got a little lost on the way home. The last thing Jack did before he drove back to Denver that following week was ride out to the family property. He didn't go inside. The restoration was still 2 weeks from completion, and he wanted to see it finished before he walked through the front door again. He sat on his motorcycle at the end of the driveway and looked at the house his father built and thought about everything a structure can hold, not in its walls, but in the lives lived inside them. The weight of 40 years of meals and arguments and silences and celebrations and ordinary Tuesday evenings that no one records or remembers individually, but that make up, in aggregate, the entire substance of what a family is. He had come back to this house 5 weeks ago and found his parents in a shed behind it. He was leaving with the house secured, the land restored, safe and warm and fed, a federal case that would take years to fully resolve, but would never again touch the people he loved, and a brother starting over with both the burden and the chance that starting over requires. He was leaving with something he hadn't had when he arrived. Not a victory, not exactly. Something quieter and more permanent than a victory. He was leaving knowing where home was, not as an idea, not as a place he sent money to, not as a concept he carried around in his chest, like a loan he was always paying off. Home was a specific address in Harlow Creek, Montana, where two people who had built him from nothing were drinking coffee and arguing about the contractor's paint selection and planning what to put back in the garden in the spring. Home was a phone call you made because you wanted, not because you owed something. Home was showing up. Reynolds, Jack Reynolds, Millionaire, chapter president, the man that other men moved out of the way for, sat on his motorcycle in the driveway of the house his father built and understood fully, finally, without any remaining doubt, that the most important thing he had ever built was not in Denver. It was right here. And he was never going to forget that again. He started the engine, and for the first time in 15 years, riding away from this town felt like something he could do because he knew with absolute certainty that he was coming back, not because he had to, because this was where he belonged. And some truths, once you finally see them clearly, you carry for the rest of your life not as a weight, but as a compass, pointing you home every single time you lose your way.